You may not know it, but the Auto Club of Southern California has been giving travelers reliable, trustworthy service for over 100 years. As we've grown, so have the benefits we offer our members. Now we can help you plan trips and save time, whether you're traveling around California, the U.S., or the world.
Road Trip with Huell is made possible by the Automobile Club of Southern California.
Hello everybody, I'm Huell Hauser, and here we are in beautiful Riverside, California. There's snow-covered Mount Baldy off there in the distance through the palm trees. Now, if you look in your history books, you'll discover that Riverside was founded back in 1870 by an abolitionist judge who wanted to establish a utopian community here. And starting in the 1880s, all the way through World War II, Riverside and the surrounding areas was literally the citrus capital of the world. This is where it all happened, right here. And here to kind of elaborate on that story, that citrus story, these are the citrus people right here. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Hello, Mr. Hauser. I'm State Park Ranger Sherman Poole.
And you are here to officially welcome us here, but you know who really runs this place, don't you?
Yes, I do. The volunteers.
Right over here, and you all know who really runs the place,
right.
Don't you?
You bet.
We are at the, let us know where we are exactly.
We're at the California State Historical Citrus Park.
It's a mouthful. You even had to think about that, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes,
and
I did.
this park is really here to do what?
We're here to preserve what the citrus industry was back in the 1900s. And we have fruit on the trees all year round in our varietal trails so that no matter when you come here, you will find citrus on our trees.
How many acres do we have here?
377.
And they're all planted either in citrus or in these big palm trees that you wanted to talk to us about, because this is kind of interesting too.
Yes, these really tall, slender palm trees had only one purpose. They don't produce fruit and they don't give much shade. They were put there because way back the orange trees grew so tall, and there were so many groves here that the people couldn't find their way to downtown or to their neighbor's home, and sometimes not even back to their own home. So they planted those to mark the roadways or the horse and buggy ways to their places.
Until you told me that story, I had never heard that before, and I'd always wondered why out in the middle. Well, when you look over here, you get a good view of it. You see the orange groves and you see the palm trees planted right up in the middle of the grove.
Yes. Although we trim our trees nowadays and they don't get up on ladders and pick, but back then they did, and therefore they grew very tall and couldn't find their way.
Well, now you know we are here on a road trip to Riverside. We have got a full calendar of events ahead of us, so we cannot stay here very long, but we wanted to stop here really to pay homage to the citrus industry, which is really what put Riverside on the map, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and we had the highest per capita in the nation back in those days when the citrus industry was at its peak.
And if people come here, they can take docent-led tours.
Yes.
You can explain the citrus industry. You've got some wonderful buildings here. You've got a wonderful schedule of events and all kinds of great future plans.
Yes.
So this is a good place for families to come.
A lot of history here. We tell you all the history of the area and all the things that are going to be here in the future in our park, and we're only at the beginning of it. We're growing and having a lot of new and wonderful things coming about.
All right, we're here. We're going to have a wonderful experience here in Riverside. We got great weather. There's snow on the mountains. The air is clean. The faint smell of citrus
blossoms
is in the air. And we're going to have a great time in Riverside. If you're interested in what we're going to find and what kind of experiences we're going to have, you're welcome to come on along with us, because we're here in Riverside on a road trip. You know how sometimes when you're on a trip, things just kind of fall into place, and you can tell right away you're going to have a great time? Well, that's how it was as we pulled into downtown Riverside to, 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 great road trip. Well, here we are. We're getting ready to start our road trip here in Riverside. Right now we're standing right in the middle of downtown Riverside in front of what has to be probably the most historic and wonderful place in all of Riverside. Wouldn't you agree, Walt?
Well, I think it's the most famous place in all of Southern California, maybe, but certainly known all over the world.
It really is known all over the world.
No question about it. No question. People come and visit here. I've toured people from countries of Europe, Asia, as well as all over the United States.
And you're going to give us the tour today. This is Walter Parks, who is a docent at the museum here. We are standing in front of, in case you haven't guessed it by now, the world famous Mission Inn. This is one of the most famous hotels in Southern California, really all over the world, but it is much more than just a hotel. It is literally intertwined with the history of California, isn't it, Walter?
Oh, absolutely. And what it represents is the California dream. The founders of the inn really wanted to make it an experience, so they harked back to the romantic era of the Mission days and made it an oasis for the people to come and visit.
Boy, you know how to set the stage right for this tour. We're going to start the tour. We're not going in the hotel right away because you've got a first stop for us to kind of get us up to speed on the history, and then we're going to spend the morning taking a tour of this wonderful old place, which is very much alive today, the Mission Inn. Let's go. Let's don't get hit. That wouldn't be a good way to start off the tour. Okay, we're inside the museum, and Walter, I didn't realize that there are a lot of school kids who come through here every day.
We tour thousands of them through every year. They come because, well, certainly in the fourth grade, they're studying California history, and this is part of California history and shows California history, but all ages are interested in it. It's a fantastic place. It's something to see, and they love it.
All right, let's get started, because when you talk about the Mission Inn, you have to talk about Mr.
Frank Miller. Frank Miller. This is really his dream. He's a quintessential 19th century man. He was a booster, a promoter, a businessman, but above that, a romantic and a dreamer. So he built, as a young man, built a hotel. He took it over from his parents back in 1880, and he built it and built it. Came under the influence of the Mission Revival movement in the early part of the late part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, and went on to build this romantic oasis for people to come to. It's part of the California dream. It's a fantasy. It never really existed. There never was really a mission here, but they call Riverside the Mission City because of it.
Now, this fella, Miller, his first name Frank, I've seen pictures of him wearing an Asian, a kimono of some sort, or some kind of a formal Japanese attire.
No, Japanese kimono, you're absolutely right. He started life as an uneducated farm boy, and he entered his life as a sophisticated man of the world who had entertained here at his hotel princes, tycoons, movie stars, and the other greats of his era. And one of his fascinations was with the Orient, particularly Japan. He went to Japan in 1925, and thereafter he would always greet his guests in a Japanese kimono. And this is an area of very formal attire, but here with this man coming down the stairs to greet these important guests like Henry Ford or Sarah Bernhardt or John Muir, all the people that came here.
In Riverside in 1925. So did people think he was kind of an eccentric?
I think they thought he was extremely charming and charismatic, is what I think. I certainly didn't know him, but that's the reports that come down. He really pulled it all off. And he was also very serious about his international interests and international affairs. And in 1929, the young Emperor Hirohito awarded him a peace medal, the highest medal that a non-Japanese can earn. And he was awarded that. The Japanese consul gave it to him here at the inn.
Wow.
So all of this Japanese art, artifacts, architectural elements that we see here in the museum, and then later on up in the inn, are a direct result of Frank Miller's interest in the Orient.
Now, would he have acquired all of this on trips to the Orient and then put them in the hotel as you know, part of the furniture, part of the look of the hotel?
Well, certainly part of the answer is yes, but he acquired stuff wherever he could acquire it. He bought things out of estates, he went to sales, he went everywhere, and he was a little bit like William Randolph Hearst in that respect, where he just liked stuff. And he loved the Oriental stuff, as we've talked about. He loved Catholic imagery, even though he was a Congregationalist. So he collected lots of stuff from Mexico, for example, which we'll see later on the tour. He just liked all kinds of things, paintings, art, artifacts, to decorate his inn, to charm his guests.
So when you came to the Mission Inn, you were going on a trip around the world. You were seeing things that you had never seen before, that he had brought and collected and placed on public view.
No, that's exactly right.
I want to see the hotel itself.
Let's go.
So we're off to the hotel.
Let's go.
Now Walter's all excited because this is your first example to talk a little bit about this Mission Revival influence architecturally.
Right.
That he was so interested in putting in the hotel.
When Frank Miller built his first major wing here in 1902, replaced the earlier hotel. He did it in the Mission Revival style, which was the movement that was certainly sweeping California at that time. And this is the Campanario, the grand entrance to the inn. Campanario means bell tower in Spanish, and it's a rough copy of the bell tower at the San Gabriel Mission over in city of San Gabriel.
Now, has this been here all this time? This is original?
From the 1902 era, it was rebuilt in 1985. It's essentially, you can say it's original, except it's been restored.
Now, what are these cannon doing here?
Well, Frank Miller got these cannon when they had the Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco and also down in San Diego. A whole lot of stuff came to those exhibitions and there wasn't money to send it back. So Frank Miller was Johnny on the spot with his checkbook, and he bought a lot of things, including these old Spanish cannon that had been in the Philippines.
And here, if there was ever any doubt about it, is the official plaque making this a California Registered Historic Landmark. It's also a Cultural Heritage Landmark from the city of Riverside.
And more importantly, it's a National Historic Landmark.
A National Historic Landmark. So this is covered on all fronts. It is definitely historical.
It definitely is historical.
We are finally going inside the hotel. Inside, well, you don't call it a hotel, you call it an inn.
Well, it's a hotel. We use both words, and it's definitely a hotel. It's an operating hotel.
Walter, as we walk inside, the first thing you see is this bell, and it's not just a coincidence that it's here, because this really ties into the history of the city of Riverside.
Well, this was the logo that Frank Miller invented for the inn. The entire thing, the double cross on top, the frame, and the mission bell, and it's referred to in Riverside as the ring cross. And our convention center is called Ring Cross Square. It's adopted by the city of Riverside. You see it on the side of our public vehicles, our fire engines, and so forth.
So it's become your city logo as well.
It's our logo, and certainly the logo of the inn. I have it on my tie, and it's you'll see it all over the inn.
Something else started by Frank Miller.
Exactly.
And here we are in the grand lobby, walking on carpet that depicts all the missions of California. So again, the mission theme is tied in. Now, was this always the lobby?
This was always the lobby. The furniture in Frank Miller's day and later was the arts and crafts style oak furniture, not like the furniture of today. And you ask about original things. This carpet was never original either. This was woven during the major restoration in 1985, and it depicts all the 21 missions in California.
And we're standing here in front of all these portraits of American presidents.
Right.
And that is part of the history of this place as well.
Well, the presidential lounge is now the main bar of the inn, but in the early days, it was a VIP suite. And when I take guests here, I say we're going into the VIP suite, and they end up in the bar. But it became a bar in 1957, but it's the presidential lounge because a number of presidents have either been here and one stayed overnight there. That was President Teddy Roosevelt in 1903. So the present owner of the inn, Mr. Duane Roberts, came up with the idea of honoring all the presidents who have come to the inn, whether they came before they were president, during their presidency, or afterwards, by having a copy made of the official White House portrait and hung out here.
Now, this one of Richard Nixon, he did more than just come here, didn't he?
That's right. He was married here to Patricia in 1940.
They were married.
And they were married.
The ceremony was
in here. And if you see the movie Nixon, you see them running out of the chapel, which we're going to see in a few minutes, but that's not quite accurate. They were actually married in this room here.
And when you come through here, of course, George W. Bush was here, but the real story is on Ronald Reagan, because
he honeymooned here with Nancy in 1952. They were married out in San Fernando Valley, and William Holden and his wife at the time were the only witnesses, the best man and matron of honor. And then they came here, the Reagans did, for the first night of their honeymoon, and then they went off to the Biltmore in Phoenix after that.
Wow. And we've got Gerald Ford, John F. Kennedy, Herbert Hoover, William Howard Taft.
Well, William Howard Taft is important because he was a sitting president when he came here. And there's a huge chair right here, which we'll see in a minute, which was Taft's chair. And the craftsman here at the inn made it for him because he weighed 300 pounds. He was a huge man. So they made this huge chair in that arts and crafts style for him to sit in when they had the banquet.
And we got three more down here. Theodore Roosevelt. And I'm not
William McKinley and
William
Benjamin Harrison.
And Benjamin Harrison. Right. So really, if the presidents came to California, they came to the Mission Inn.
That's right. And Frank Miller was a staunch Republican. And Republicans ran the state in the early part of its history. And he was very much a part of that scene, and he knew all the Republicans. And the fact that we have one Democrat was that John Kennedy came here as a student and, before he was president.
All right, look, we got the kids all trying out the chair right here. That's a big chair, isn't it, kids? Yeah. Yeah, look at this. This is the chair. Let's try to, can he sit in that?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Oh, sure.
That's the chair. Look, we can get two. We can get three in the chair that held William Howard Taft.
That's right.
Back in
1909.
So you all are sitting in a very famous chair right now. One man took up that whole chair. He was pretty big.
They had the banquet in the Refectorio, which is now Duane's, a very fine restaurant here at the inn, and they made that for him to sit in. And there's three stories come down. Frank Miller served no hard liquor in the inn in his day, and but one story is that Taft was upset that this chair showed he was a gross fat man. Oh. The other story is he was happy to sit in something that after being run all over the county and shaking hands with everybody in the county. And the third story is that his favorite bottle of brandy was on the little shelf that's down under the arm there. They may all be true, they may none be true, who knows, but they're great stories anyway.
We're in the courtyard, one of many courtyards, I'll imagine.
This is the Spanish patio, actually. It's the official name of this particular courtyard. And when Frank Miller returned from Spain with the family in 1914, he wanted to create his own version of a Spanish castle. So he made this right angle wing, which connected with the cloister wing over there and the mission wing behind us, and then hung it with all of this tile and balconies and wrought iron.
And a clock up there in the corner. That's right. Amazing.
That's right. And we call that the Anton clock. The original clock face is in the museum. That's a replica. And below that are 5 figures important to California history that rotate every 15 minutes.
And even something like these gargoyles have an interesting story to them.
Well, Frank Miller brought one back, so the story goes, and had the others made, and then the marble part of the fountain is supposed to date back several centuries. That came from Spain. Various tiles came from Spain and perhaps from California too. Anyway, he cobbled that all together to make this central fountain.
This is just amazing to look at this architecture because it really is a little bit of everything.
That's right. As I said earlier, it evolves out of Mission Revival, but just like Mission Revival evolved into Spanish Revival and Spanish Colonial and all the other things, so does the Inn. And then Frank Miller put his own versions of Italian architecture and Spanish architecture as he traveled. And there's even some Oriental touches that we'll see a little bit later
Now,
too.
do people still come out here? We're a little early this morning, but has this always been used as a dining area?
It was created as a dining area, and I submit on a warm summer night, this is the most romantic place in the world to have dinner. It's a little chilly right now.
Underneath the orange tree, which of course is synonymous with Riverside in the first place.
The navel orange tree, absolutely. And this is when they're ripe, so those are nice sweet navels hanging on that tree.
Okay, we've come up a floor for yet another and a little different view of the courtyard, but Walter, we didn't come up here to look at this view. We came up here to look at something that is really just breathtaking when you see it for the first time.
Well, we're leaving the Spanish wing. We're now in the Rotunda wing in the St. Francis Atrio, and we're about to go into the St. Francis Chapel.
The chapel. Now, what was his idea about having a chapel?
Well, Frank Miller actually designed the chapel to house some treasures that he had obtained about 1919. And he finished the chapel in this whole wing in 1931.
I'm just looking over your shoulder at this.
Well,
this is spectacular.
This is a Della Robbia, which has a very ancient date on it. I think it's 1522, but our curators say that it's probably a late 19th century copy.
Well, it still goes back quite a ways.
And
And
it's
what
very
is
beautiful.
this over here?
Well, this is the famous Flyers Wall at the Mission Inn. The family was very much into flying, and they were very much part of that early 20th century group of Americans who believed that now that man could fly, this was going to improve the status of man and improve international peace and international relations. So they honored famous flyers that came to the inn by a special ceremony where that flyer would etch his autograph into the left side of the wing, and then the date of the ceremony is in the right, and then some little symbol apropos of that flyer is in the center.
So all of these flyers, look at this, actually came to the inn.
That's correct.
And were part of a ceremony. Are there names that we would recognize?
Jimmy Doolittle, Hap Arnold, Eddie Rickenbacker, John Glenn, and many that only had their 15 minutes of fame. And probably the most famous and most important is Amelia Earhart, who came here, and her wings are right over here on the wall.
Where? Right over here? Ah, right here.
And she was a modest woman, and all she put in the center of her wings was AE, her initials.
We're going to go inside this amazing, look at this window out here.
Now that's a Tiffany window,
my.
made by Louis Comfort Tiffany, America's greatest glassmaker, and there's more Tiffany windows inside.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Walter, this is one of the most magnificent, you call these altar screens?
Well, that's in English. It's retablo in Spanish is the common term for it, but it's a big screen behind the altar.
And what is the story on how he acquired this? Because this is just magnificent.
Well, in about 1919, he got a message from a contact down in Mexico that this was available. It had been in a palace in Guanajuato. It had been constructed in the 18th century, and but that palace was being sold, and for some reason the retablo was being sold separately. So he said, if you can get it to El Paso, I'll buy it. This was during the Mexican Revolution. Things were disrupted in Mexico. So they shipped it to El Paso, allegedly in dirty stable straw, and he insured it for $5,000, which is the only thing we know about the price. Anyway, it was shipped here, and his craftsmen assembled it in another space, and then that alcove was constructed to house it, and when they completed it here in 1931, completed the chapel, they installed it there.
Now, are there actual services held here?
No, this is a wedding chapel, Again, you asked me why was the chapel created? Well, it was created to house these treasures, but it was also part of the romance of the inn, being married at the inn. And so there have been very few other events here. Frank Miller's funeral was one, a few other events, but thousands of beautiful brides have come down this aisle to be married here, and it's still the most popular place in our area to be married.
Okay, we're ending up on the top of the world up here. What floor are we on, Walter?
Actually, this is the 4th floor up here.
Boy, this really gives you a wonderful view of, I was going to say the whole place, but this is still, this tour that you've given us has still just kind of scratched the surface.
That's right. There are a couple of other places, like a half a dozen, that you haven't seen yet. But you've seen most of the really wonderful things, and this is a great view here.
We've climbed a lot of circular stairways to get up from level to level.
And when we take the tours, we often use the elevators too, so everybody doesn't have to do all the stairways.
And we're ending up here with this. Well, now there's the, you call it,
St. Francis Chapel.
It's literally called a chapel.
That's right. It's a wedding chapel, but it's called the St. Francis Chapel. Frank Miller was enamored with the stories of St. Francis preaching to the birds. And so he dedicated the chapel to St. Francis and the atrio below us, the patio below us.
There go the bells, and we're standing here with this amazing view looking out at the snow-covered mountains out here. What a beautiful view with the inn kind of, you know, silhouetting against it. And we're looking down at this old building right here, which has not been restored. And that brings to mind the whole idea that for many years, this inn was sitting here totally deserted, falling apart, and abandoned.
Well, it never was completely abandoned. It certainly was falling apart. That's an apt description. And it was closed in 1985, and it was closed for 7 years. And we didn't have our inn. But during that time, they did a massive renovation. And then it was ready to open in the early 90s, but they had some serious financial problems. And ultimately, Mr. Dwayne Roberts bought it right at the end of 1992. So we got our inn back then, and Mr. Roberts and the rest of us have never looked back. It's really having its heyday today.
Well, thank goodness it's back open, it's alive and well, and Frank Miller's dream is alive and well. This wonderful man who brought so much to Riverside, his quest for world peace is still a quest that we're all on together, and this inn is still here to remind us of this city's rich past and its future.
It's still a romantic fantasy land, just like he envisioned at the beginning.
Well, as our road trip continues, we have hooked up with Vince Moses from the Riverside Municipal Museum. And Vince, we're standing once again by the Mission Inn, which I think is like literally, when you're talking about history and you're talking about Riverside, it's ground zero.
Oh, that's exactly right. This was the core of the original community, and the Mission Inn was at the heart of the core. You can't do better than that.
Okay, so we're at the heart of the core, and when we look across the street, there's another one of these beautiful old buildings. That's Old City Hall.
That's exactly right. It's Old City Hall. It's opened in 1924. It's a Spanish Renaissance style building. It's on the National Register of Historic Places.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, now over here, now this isn't old, is it?
No, this is not old. This was built in the mid-1980s as a memorial to our pioneer Chinese population in Riverside.
There was a big Chinese population here at one time?
Very big population because of the naval orange industry. We had sometimes up to 2,000 Chinese workers here harvesting the fruit and bringing it in for packing. And we did an archaeological excavation on Old Chinatown. This is a result. The local Chinese population decided they wanted to build a monument to their ancestors, and they did.
So what better place to build it than right here in this historic area here? Got a lot of kids. Now, we saw kids at the Mission Inn taking the tour. Do they come down and spend the whole day visiting this whole historic core here?
Oh, well, they really do, because they'll visit all 4 or 5 of the museums. They'll visit the fire station, they visit the library and get their library cards. So let's spend the whole day here. They'll have lunch here. They know you're here now.
We're in trouble now. There are the kids. Hey, kids! Oh boy, we're in trouble now.
Trouble now.
All right, let's keep walking. Let's try to stay ahead of them. Over here is an interesting building.
Yeah, this was Frank Miller's own church, the master of the Mission Inn. He actually had his architect, Myron Hunt, come out and design this church, Spanish Renaissance style. One of the ministers, early ministers, in fact, Huell said, Riverside's not big enough for me and Frank Miller, and you can guess which one's leaving.
So Frank Miller, we've already heard he wasn't Catholic.
No,
This
was a congregational church. And Miller was really a Quaker, but when he came here, there really wasn't a practicing Quaker or Friends community, so he joined the Congregationalists and helped build this church.
Now across the street is another historic building.
This is the All Souls Universalist Church, built in 1891. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. This is a special Arizona sandstone. There's one other building in Southern California, in Santa Ana Courthouse, is built with the same red Arizona sandstone.
Now, why is this on the National Register of Historic Places?
Because of the people affiliated with it, because of the architectural style. It's Norman Gothic, it's very early for California, and because one of the famous Universalist ministers of the United States came and pastored this church, Dr. George Deere. It's just an indication of the kind of the elite status of Riverside in the heyday of the Naval Orange.
Now look over here. This district just keeps on going, doesn't it? Because I know this has got to be historic here.
Oh, yes, sir. Huell, this is the Soldiers Memorial and Municipal Auditorium. It was built to commemorate the soldiers who served in World War I. Miller, again, had a hand in this. He donated the land and said, if you'll build it in the Mission Revival style, I'll give you the land and bring the architect in to design it.
So Miller had his hand in all of this.
Everything down here, because his aim was to create a tourist mecca.
Now, is this still used today? Because look at the front of this. It's just beautiful.
Oh, this is definitely used today. It's used by the County Philharmonic. It's used by the ballet. It's used for special concerts. You see lots of children back out here. Again, they have children's programs in here. So.
And then it goes on down here.
Yes, it does. This is the Riverside Art Museum. It was designed by the famous Julia Morgan of the Hearst Castle fame. It was designed and built originally as a YWCA, and she really made her living designing YWCAs around California.
So this is used now as...
It's the Riverside Art Museum for watercolor oils. It's very well known. The Watercolor West show that's held in here every year draws the best watercolor artists from all over the western United States.
Boy, this is really something right here. This wonderful old YWCA designed by Julia Morgan, who is definitely one of California's greatest architects.
Yes, she is. One of the first women to graduate from the architectural school at Berkeley.
And isn't it interesting how Riverside has taken all of these old buildings and kept them alive, in many cases giving them new uses and new leases on life, and making this whole area a very vibrant, exciting place to visit.
It's becoming more exciting too, Huell, because we're creating an arts and culture district downtown. The University of California is bringing their art gallery down to one of the older buildings in town and renovating it. So it's a real emphasis of the City Council.
So if you come here on a road trip, you can literally park, and within a 3 or 4 square block area right here, you can do it all on foot. Just walk around and visit all these places and make a whole day out of it.
Yes, you can, and you could have lunch at the Mission Inn or at Simple Simon's, one of the nice restaurants downtown, and just have a really wonderful cultural experience.
Do you own stock in Simple Simon's? Why did you mention Simple Simon's?
It just happens to be the most popular lunch place downtown.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No,
it is one
that's-
of my favorites.
That's okay.
I could throw in a few more.
The idea is when you come downtown, look at this right here. Look at this shot right here. This is just beautiful. All the way down, we're just a block from the Mission Inn. Look at this. Here's the church, Frank Miller's church right here.
That's right.
And all of this is just right here, including your museum.
Yes, the Riverside Municipal Museum is right in the core here. We handle the local history, anthropologists, Native Americans, and the natural history of the community. And we're really proud to serve that community because Just come right here and do it all.
So if you love history, if you love architecture, if you like little walking tours, this is the place to come when you come to Riverside.
This is definitely the place to come.
What did you call it?
I call this the heart, or the heart of the core of Old Riverside.
The heart of the core of Old Riverside.
Yes, sir, it is. And of course, this was surrounded by 20,000 acres of navel oranges in the early days, so you can imagine what it was like.
We're now on the Main Street Mall, which is just right off the, what's the street the Mission Inn's on?
Mission Inn Avenue.
Okay, Mission Inn Avenue. This cuts right off of it. And this is where you have all your festivals.
Our Orange Blossom Festival, our Family Village Festival are all held here. Works out really well for that purpose.
And you brought us here because we're on our way to another destination, but on the way to that other destination, you wanted to show us a new statue that has been just recently dedicated here. And this is very, very unusual. It's called the, what is this?
This is the Dosan An Chang Ho Memorial. It's dedicated, as you can see here, on August 11, 2001 by the former Prime Minister of the Republic of Korea and the leaders of the Korean community here in Riverside. The Ambassador of the United States was here. It's dedicated to the man who picked oranges in Riverside from 1903 to 1913. But this was not just an ordinary orange picker. He was a Confucian scholar. He was the man who led the independence movement against the Empire of Japan, and is recognized by Korean peoples all over the world as their George Washington, Thomas Jefferson rolled into one.
Now wait a minute, this guy was Korean. He was picking oranges in Riverside from 1903
to 1913.
And all the while he was what, writing a new constitution? And
that's exactly right. While in Riverside, in fair obscurity, he was writing the constitution for the provisional government of Korea that would be formed in Shanghai. He was writing what would become the organization that would defeat the Empire of Japan.
That is amazing. And that again is one of those little known bits of California history that very few of us would know about.
Well, that's right. And you know, there are more than 600,000 Korean Americans living in Southern California, and they're all making this a pilgrimage now. In fact, coming all the way from the Republic of Korea to visit this statue. Exactly. To visit this statue.
And isn't that interesting that this statue is just a block away from Frank Miller's Mission Inn, and his whole quest in life was for world peace and understanding and internationalism.
That's absolutely correct. Miller would have been a foursquare supporter of the dedication of this statue for the very reasons you cite, for world peace and international understanding.
Continuing our walk down the Main Street Mall, now where are we going?
We're headed to the California Museum of Photography, which is a division of the University of California here in Riverside.
Okay, so this is the University of California at Riverside's Photography Museum, and I remember just a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when this opened up.
That's right. They moved down from the campus about 10 years ago into the old Crest building, renovated it, had a nationally known architect design the renovation. And they house about 400,000 historic stereographs from the Keystone Mass Collection.
And did you tell me something neat's going to happen at this building right next door?
Well, the building next door is the old Rouse department store, Huell, and the university's purchased that. They're going to move their Sweeney Art Gallery in there and have artists and residence activities in that building, too.
So there's a lot of art and kind of interesting stuff like that going on right down here.
That's exactly right. It's all part of that heart of the core of Old Riverside.
It's just getting better.
It's getting better all the time.
All right, we're going inside the Photography Museum to see just a little bit of the collection because there are over 300,000 pieces in the collection. Okay, we're inside the museum. I've hooked up with Jonathan Green, who is the director. And the first thing you notice when you come in here, you've got these wonderful exhibits everywhere, and this one catches your eye right away. It is quite an interesting exhibit.
This is one of the most complete collections of Brownie cameras.
Look at these.
And we've had a number of donors over the years who've been very interested in making sure that we have examples of high-tech cameras and low-tech cameras. And this comes from a man by the name of Norwood Teague.
All right, now this is the Brownie camera collection, but that's not what this Photography Museum is really all about, isn't it?
That's right. What we're really noted for is the Keystone Mast Collection, which is 350,000 glass plate stereo negatives, the world's largest collection of stereo opticon material.
Now, wait a minute. That's just a fancy way of saying 3D, right?
3D, absolutely.
All right,
3D.
now you've got a little setup over here for us. We peeked in here just a minute ago to get the lay of the land, and this is very interesting. What do we do here, Jonathan?
What you do is we're going to look at these 3D images by covering each eye with a different color. These are called anaglyphic glasses.
And we're looking at a picture. Our camera won't be able to see it in 3D, but boy, you can sure see it in 3D when you've got these.
It pops out because each eye, in fact, sees a different image. Wow. And what 3D photography does, it allows each eye to see precisely what that eye would normally see.
And you've got 350,000 of these images.
That's right. This is really the history, the pictorial history of the world before film, before television. These begin back in the 1850s and go up through the turn of the century.
Now you've got all kind of exhibits out here which are very interesting of 3D cameras, and this is the first time that I'd ever realized that when you're taking 3Ds, you've got two lenses, two eyes.
That's right. That's right. If anyone wants to experiment, you just stand and look out into space and cover one eye and then cover the other eye, and you'll see that each eye actually sees a different part of the world. So these cameras simultaneously take two pictures.
And you've got all kinds of exhibits here of, well, look at these teeny, teeny little cameras. Now, these aren't 3D.
These are not 3D, but they're a big audience favorite. They're kind of spy cameras. We have the original James Bond camera and other such things.
And you got all kinds of camera exhibits here, but you also, this collection is available for anybody to come in off the street and look at.
Absolutely. What we're standing is in our permanent collections gallery, and this is really the tip of the iceberg of the material that we hold. We have the largest collection of cameras in western United States, wow. The largest collection, as we said, of stereo images, and these materials are always on view.
So do you have scholars? Do you have writers? Do you have photographers? Do you have just people off the street? You got a little bit of everybody.
Everybody. In fact, we've had a number of these wonderful experiences where someone, say, from what was once the Soviet Union in the early 90s, heard that we had a few 3D images of Russia. He came, planned to spend an afternoon and spend 3 weeks, and found that we had many more images of pre-revolutionary Russia than they have in Moscow.
Well, we can't stay 3 weeks. We've got to move on. This is a fairly quick 2-day road trip we're on, but this is an amazing place that I think a lot of people are still learning about. And the interesting thing is it's not only available for scholars, but anybody can walk in off the street, look at these exhibits, go down in the collection, look at the pictures themselves,
yes.
Put on the 3D glasses, and see the world the way a 3D camera would have seen it from 1850 until...
Oh, through about 1940 at the very latest.
Wow.
Yes. We should send you off looking at the world's first motion picture here. This is Edward...
Wait a minute. What is this?
This is called a zoetrope, and it's Edward Muybridge's photographing the horse as it runs down the track. Now, when we spin it this way, it's going to look perfectly blurry, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now back up and get down so that you're looking through the slots. And
it looks like a movie.
Absolutely. What you're seeing it is frame by frame as it moves through there, and this, in fact, is the world's first motion picture, courtesy of still photography.
You never know what you're going to find when you come to the Museum of Photography in Riverside. Well, as we continue our road trip here in Riverside, we have come to the east side of Riverside and hooked up with Ray Buriel, who is a professor at Pomona College, one of the Claremont colleges, and his mom, Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Now, you are a native of Riverside.
Yes, I was born and raised here.
And why did you bring us to this particular neighborhood? How does this tie in to the history of this town?
Well, Riverside, of course, has been around for quite a while, but the Latino, particularly the Mexican descent community, really first started to grow here in this particular area. And it was drawn here primarily by the citrus industry, for which Riverside was very well known. And if you look up the street here, you can see one of the old packing houses, and all down that street back there by the railroad tracks was just row after row of packing houses.
Ah, so the workers would live around the packing houses.
Right. The men primarily worked in the citrus, picking oranges, lemon, and the women, like my mom and my aunts and other ladies, worked packing in the packing houses.
So you remember those days working in the packing houses?
Yes.
Was it hard work?
Not so much.
And
Yes.
you had moved here from,
Illinois.
so you were glad to probably be in warm weather.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You came here in
1922.
1922, which ties directly into why we're standing in front of this church. The name of this church is?
Our Lady of Guadalupe Shrine.
And it was established in?
1929 is when it was dedicated.
Now, why is it important that we are standing in front of this church? Because this kind of all ties together, doesn't it?
Right. Well, as I said, the Latino community first started to grow here, and when they very devout people, and when they had to attend church, they'd have to go across the tracks way over to another church, and for the longest time, they wanted to have their own church in their own community. And this was just at the beginning of the Depression, and so it was very hard, but they pulled together and started to build this church on their own. They didn't take out any loans. The understanding with the bishop was it had to be paid cash.
And your mom was one of the ringleaders, wasn't she?
Right. She was one of the ones who would go around and sell food door to door to raise money so that the materials could be bought. The men who worked in the packing house, this was all built by the parishioners themselves. So on weekends, the men would come and work here. The drivers of the trucks who used to carry
so they would help build it themselves.
Right. The drivers, the guys who took the workers to the field and brought the citrus back, used their trucks on the weekends to go to the river bottom, pick up sand, bring it here, and this way they built everything on their own.
And do you remember that day in 1929 when it was dedicated?
Yes, I do.
Was it a big deal? It must have been a very exciting day.
Yes, very exciting.
What happened here that day? Were crowds of people, lots of people?
Yes, and mariachis, and very nice.
And a real sense of pride.
Yes, because this was their church. They built it. There's a little story, though. They wanted to name it originally, since its inception, Our Lady of Guadalupe, because she's the patroness of Mexico and the Americas. But an anonymous donor, a woman from the East, gave $1,000 towards the construction, and they didn't know about it. And she did it on the condition that it would be named St. Francis of Assisi.
Oh my gosh!
So they named the church St. Francis of Assisi, but yet underneath their breath, it was called Our Lady of Guadalupe Shrine, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And then when Monsignor Gomez was here in 1957, he convinced the bishop to officially change the name, and to not only change the name, but to declare it a shrine, which means that it is a national shrine like no other one in the United States to our Virgin of Guadalupe.
Well, let's go inside, because you've told me there's some wonderful things to see inside. And if anybody can give us the $5 grand tour, it's this lady right here. She was here from the very beginning.
That's right.
All right, we are inside the church, and there is Our Lady of Guadalupe up over the altar.
That's right. This is a statue of the Our Lady of Guadalupe. The original image is in the Basilica in Mexico City, but since this is a shrine, people come here often when they can't go over there.
Now, has this statue been here since the church was dedicated in 1929?
No, the statue actually was brought over in, I think, 1957 when the church's name...
Oh, was renamed?
Yes.
So was Francis of Assisi up here until then?
Well, we actually had a statue of St. Francis of Assisi outdoors, but Our Lady of Guadalupe is indoors.
And standing here watching your mom looking up at Our Lady, she is very active in this church, isn't she?
Yes, she's 93 years old, but still gets up every morning and comes and opens the church. And if the priest doesn't wake up, she wakes him up.
So you're here every single morning?
Yes. I am here to open the church and to prepare everything for the Father to say Mass.
And do you think most people who come here on Sundays to Mass know the history of how this church was built and how much sacrifice went into having it established in the first place?
Some of the people doesn't know that because it's the people that came later on from Mexico or South America.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, this is a story that needs to be told.
Well, it's an interesting one. I think it just shows the dedication of the people here, their desire to have their own church, and now it's recognized as a shrine across the nation. Mm-hmm. And it's known in Mexico. People will come from Mexico to this place.
Really?
Yes.
Before we leave this shrine, you wanted to point out this plaque in the back of the church here. I never would have seen this, but it's a very important part of recent history, just going back about 50 years.
Right, it's part of the community history. These are the names of parishioners here who died in World War II. Most of them were in Europe and some in the Pacific arena. Many of them, the last names are the same last names of the founders of the church. Some have our relatives' names. So this kind of shows the history of our church. I mean, we're proud of our heritage as Mexicans, but we're also loyal to this country and you know, and to its missions. And so this is here in honor of them.
Could you read the names for us?
Yeah. Darío Vázquez, Venturo Macías, Gus Cabrera, Manuel Rangel, Teodoro Molindo. May they rest in peace.
Okay, Ray and his mom have brought us to lunch here just a couple of blocks from the church.
Right.
And you have brought us to the hot spot in town, Ray.
Right, here on the east side, this is Zacatecas Cafe, and it's owned by the Medina family, whose picture's here. Unfortunately, they're so busy doing all sorts of things that
They're
none
not
of them are
here
here right now. But this is Oscar, who founded the restaurant, and his wife and his children. And they named it, they're originally from the state of Zacatecas in Mexico, and so sort of in memory of that, they named this restaurant Zacatecas.
And this is the hot spot. What happens here, Ray, during the day?
See, a lot of people come here, of course, to eat, but this is also the place where people come to politic, to plan, and everything from celebrations to demonstrations get concocted here.
Great. So the food is good, too, and we were going to do a story, concentrate a little bit more on the food, but something else happened. We were sitting here eating together, and we started talking. Let's sit back down. Your mom's eating her salad there. We just got our food delivered. We started talking, which is one of the things that happens here, and I asked you the question because I remember earlier in the day, your mom had mentioned that she had moved to Riverside in 1922 from Illinois.
Right.
And that brings to mind the question, why was she in Illinois?
Well, the family, before my mom was even born, the representatives of the Rock Island Railroad went down to Romita, Mexico, in Guanajuato, where our family on my mom's side is from, and hired the family to come and work on the railroad. So my grandfather brought his wife, my grandmother, Federica, and they were processed in El Paso and given a boxcar to live in, and my mom was born there in El Paso, in the Chamizal, which now belongs to Mexico. Anyways, because my grandfather worked repairing the railroads, they followed the railroad all across the Midwest. They would stop for months living in the boxcar and then couple them back up and head further east. And the roundhouse for the Rock Island was in Silvis, Illinois, so that's where that was the end of the line. They could turn around and come back, but my grandfather decided to stay there and work for a while, and then decided to bring the family here to Riverside, California, where some of his family was already working in the citrus industry.
So that's how she got to Riverside in a boxcar, literally, because her husband and her family worked for the railroad.
Right. That's a story about a lot of Mexican families that a lot of people don't know. Many of them still live in little communities throughout the Midwest that were former just colonies of boxcars. People just decided that's where they wanted to stay. our family, because it was not just my my grandparents' family, but some of their extended family also followed. So I have aunts and uncles that were born all across the United States, Horton, Kansas, Silvis, Illinois, and various other places.
These are amazing stories that we all need to hear, and if we don't hear them, they're lost forever.
Right. I mean, the richness and diversity of experiences that brought people here to this small community is astounding, and it's probably like the stories that abound in other communities like this.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your stories with all of us. Thank you very much for taking us to the church this morning. She's ahead of us on lunch. We're going to get caught up, and we're just about toward the end of our road trip. We have one more place to go before we leave Riverside. Thank you again very much. And look at this food. It all looks delicious. Thanks for bringing us here, too.
Our pleasure.
Well, that's it. That's the end of our two-day road trip here to Riverside. We have met a lot of very nice people, been to some wonderful places, and we're ending up our road trip up here on top of Mount Rubidoux, which is one of the honest-to-goodness landmarks of the city of Riverside. Everybody knows about this mountain. It's right in the middle of town. People hike up this mountain all the time. This is a real focal point for Riverside. And there it is right there, Riverside, on this clear, beautiful day. You can see the mountains off in the distance, a little bit of snow on the top. We have just had a great time here. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. This is a wonderful place to visit with your family and friends. We'd like to thank the people of Riverside for their hospitality. We'll be back because there's a lot more to see. And I hope you've had as much fun as we have on this road trip. Goodbye, everybody.
Road Trip with Huell Hauser is made possible by the Automobile Club of Southern California.
Next time you're ready to travel around California or anywhere in the world, remember, the Auto Club can help you save time and plan everything, and that can make any trip a lot more enjoyable. See you out there.
Serving your travel needs for over 100 years, the Auto Club of Southern California. We're always with you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Huell Hauser. And if you enjoyed our road trip to beautiful and historic Riverside and would like to see it again or share it with family and friends, it's available on video cassette. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.